In the winter of 1842, a school ledger in rural Maine recorded the name Clara with no surname, no guardian, and no corresponding twin, just a faint charcoal arrow pointing downward in the margin. That same week, a teacher's drawer was found locked from the inside containing a note in ink that refused to dry. One sister was still present. The other had not been seen in days, yet both trays of breakfast had been cleared until the final morning when one plate was untouched and flipped upside down. There was no funeral, no declaration of death, only a reorganization of names. The records were adjusted, the bed was moved, and no one asked why she kept answering to both names. What happens when an institution forgets one child too early and remembers the other too long? Or worse, when it no longer knows which is which? Like the video and subscribe if you're ready to step into the mystery of the Duskbloom Sisters. And if you're listening right now, tell me your country and the time. There's comfort in knowing we're all out there scattered across timelines watching the same story unfold. In the ledger of Dr. Ezra Caldwell, the call is recorded simply: Lot 7 house call, Willow Creek, child nonverbal, minor hand abrasion. But what he found in that farmhouse was not minor, and certainly not contained to a child's hands. The girl identified as Clara V. Hale, age 9, sat motionless in the upper bedroom of a 2-story farmhouse belonging to Martha Hale, a 43-year-old widow and schoolteacher. The girl's posture was upright, rigid, even after hours of observation. Her nightdress was neatly pressed, but stained with charcoal dust. She did not speak. She did not blink when addressed. In her lap, and across the threadbare quilt, lay loose sheets of paper, school scraps, notebook margins, folded pages torn from a ledger. On each, she had written the same word in childish but focused script beneath. Not once, not twice, but 49 times. Dr. Caldwell's journal notes an immediate concern for catatonia, though he uses the term mental exhaustion. He cleaned the child's hands, noting a line of swelling along her right wrist and a chalky buildup in the creases of her fingernails. She did not resist when her writing was taken away, nor did she request its return. When asked about the girl's twin, Cora, the other child known to live in the home, Mrs. Hale responded that she had gone to stay with the church matron for a few nights. But no such record exists. The local Presbyterian house had been closed for the week due to a collapsed roof, a fact confirmed by Deacon Samuel Loring, who had signed off the ledger for repairs on November 28th. Cora Hale had not been seen since the last day of November. More troubling still, in the school's attendance roll, kept meticulously by Mrs. Hale, both girls were marked present through December 3rd. Each line is initialed as required in the left margin, but the handwriting changes on that final entry. The C is curved differently, and the ink bleeds slightly toward the spine of the book, as though written with unsteady pressure. Dr. Caldwell requested the town clerk file a record of observation. That report was submitted but later amended. In a rare blue ink notation, the clerk added, "Only one child now resides at the Hale home." Ledger updated accordingly. There is no mention of Cora's removal, transfer, or death. No church burial, no disciplinary withdrawal from school. Only this, a change from Hale Clara Cora to Hale Clara. When the papers were later reviewed after the second incident, they were found stored neatly in a box labeled Scrap Exercises Winter Term. The word beneath had begun to tilt on the final pages, each new copy drifting slightly to the right, as if the writing hand had shifted, as if the writer had begun to lean into the word, not just repeat it. The last paper was folded twice, tucked inside a hollowed-out arithmetic primer. On its back, pressed lightly in charcoal, was a shape that resembled a window. No lines, no panes, just a rectangle. No one could say when it was drawn. Clara never wrote another word again, but when asked where her sister had gone, she lifted one finger to her throat, paused, and pointed to the floorboards beneath her bed. She mouthed it once clearly, beneath. The official property report filed by Constable Gideon Pratt on December 7th describes a well-kept but emotionally disordered home. The kind of phrasing often applied in 19th century records when grief complicated judgment. Widow Martha Hale had maintained her license as both instructor and caretaker since 1835, approved to oversee a rotating household of local orphans, including the Hale twins, who had lived with her since infancy. The upper room, shared by Clara and her now missing sister Cora, presented few signs of struggle, no overturned chairs, no signs of forced entry. The bedding was folded. The floor was swept. But near the back wall, the constable's notes mention a pane of glass with a center-out fracture. Shards still resting along the outer sill. From inside, it appeared broken outward, as if struck from within. Below that window, just outside in the frozen earth, were two unremarkable scuffs in the snow. Not full footprints, just small indentations, the kind made by knees or elbows, or something being slowly lowered. Mrs. Hale told the constable that the girls had not left the house in close to a fortnight, confined due to a cold snap and a prolonged fever Clara had suffered. She also insisted she'd heard no breakage, no raised voices, and that both girls had been present the morning of December 3rd, eating oatmeal and reciting prayers. But neighbors contradicted that. Mrs. Abigail Morse, who lived on the adjacent property, later testified under oath that she hadn't seen Cora since November 29th, and that Clara, when spotted through the front window, was seen sitting motionless on the staircase for hours, often still dressed in nightclothes well past noon. Inside the room, one object stood out. The window frame, once standard wood joinery, had been nailed shut, not just latched, for iron nails, each driven at a downward angle through the upper corners and sides. The splintered pane existed in direct contradiction to its fastening. No record exists of who hammered the nails, nor when. They were weathered with minor rust along the heads, suggesting they had been there well before the fracture occurred. Pressed further about the condition of Clara's hands, abrasions on the fingertips, splinters under the nail bed, Mrs. Hale claimed she had fallen days earlier while retrieving kindling from the back porch, but Clara had not been outdoors, according to her own earlier account. The stories did not align. A cabinet beneath the writing desk contained a child's apron, carefully folded, with wood dust in its pockets. When questioned, Clara offered no explanation. But in the dust was a thread, a length of blue yarn looped tightly around a small stick, the type of cord often used to secure teaching slates or bundle lessons. The next day, the bedroom was locked for observation. The constable returned 2 days later. The nails in the window frame had been removed cleanly with no marks or tool evidence left behind. The frame had been wiped down. The fractured pane was still intact, but the outer sill had been scrubbed. Not by constable order. No person claimed responsibility. The amended report noted this anomaly without speculation. Just one line added in a different hand below the signature. One left, one remains. The sill says otherwise. Among the few surviving records from the Willow Creek Parish School are a series of narrow composition books labeled simply Student Recollections, AM Devotions, kept between 1836 and 1842. The ledgers include handwritten responses from children ages 7 to 12, often describing dreams, thoughts from scripture, or night impressions, as the instructor titled them. The handwriting varies, the tone does not. But what stands out across 3 volumes over a span of nearly 6 years are the matched entries of Clara and Cora Hale. The entries, though recorded separately, show a persistent overlap. In over 24 instances, the girls described identical settings, actions, and figures. One noted a hallway in the dark, the other an iron latch she could not lift. One described hearing her own name from beneath a floorboard. The other said she answered without speaking. Most unsettling, however, is that both girls consistently and independently ended their accounts with the exact same phrase. She woke up before me. It's unclear who she refers to in each entry. The names Clara and Cora rarely appear within the body of the text. In one instance dated April 12, 1841, the 2 girls submitted dreams referencing a girl who stands by the window. Each drew a small figure in the margin, a rough pencil sketch of a girl in profile, hands behind her back, eyes not shown. After this entry, the schoolmaster added a footnote in the ledger, "Shall cease recording dreams." Interferes with lessons. No further entries appear after May 1841. Testimony from Miss Martha Hale, who served as both guardian and teacher, claimed the practice of recording dreams was a calming exercise during morning lessons, originally intended to help younger children articulate feelings. But former students, including Sarah Whitcomb, recalled a more rigid atmosphere. She described the excerpts as a daily requirement before speaking aloud. The dreams were not discussed in class, only recorded. No child was permitted to read another's account. The books were kept locked in a desk drawer, opened only during the morning devotional hour. Curiously, the ink signatures beneath each entry begin to diverge over time. In late 1840, Cora's name begins appearing twice on several pages, once as a printed label in the margin, and once in faint cursive below the entry. The second version appears hesitant, poorly formed. It's not conclusive handwriting evidence, but side-by-side comparisons suggest that 2 hands may have been attempting the same name. The final dream recorded by Clara appears in late spring, just before the entries ceased. It reads, She didn't wake up first this time. I heard her crawl. I didn't open my eyes. There is no accompanying sketch, just a line drawn beneath it. 2 horizontal strokes, joined by a curved mark in the center. The same symbol carved under the sisters' desks months later. By midsummer of 1842, Miss Hale submitted a formal notice of discontinued morning records. She cited loss of instructional value. The ledger ends with a torn page, not removed, torn at the seam. On the back of that final sheet is a faint pressure mark, likely from a pencil resting on the page above it. When magnified under light, it appears to spell 2 names. Both begin with C. Both end abruptly. One has been rubbed nearly out, the other has no period. The behavior of Clara and Cora Hale during school instruction was long noted as curious, but never formally questioned. In a time when conformity was favored and obedience rewarded, the 2 girls, identical in appearance and manner, were often held up as examples of proper discipline. But in later interviews, classmates described a more unnerving symmetry. In the Schoolhouse Journal for November 18, 1841, a single note appears beneath the morning roster. C+C answered in pair, asked one, heard both. Children recalled how the twins would respond to oral recitations in perfect sync, same tone, same pacing. When asked to read scripture aloud, they paused on the same punctuation, even when separated by seating. One child, Elias Tucker, age 11 at the time, remarked that they blinked like mirrors, always at the same beat, always with the same flat expression. Initially dismissed as mimicry or childhood game-playing, the behavior persisted into more abstract lessons. When asked to spell words aloud, one would begin the first syllable, the other would complete it without glancing at each other. This continued even when one was placed at the front of the room, the other at the back. A report filed by Reverend Amos Crane, who visited the school in early 1842 during a parish review, includes a single line in his personal correspondence. The Hale girls speak as if one mouth from 2 stems, like 2 lanterns from the same wick. The Reverend's phrasing, poetic in nature, masks his deeper concern. In a second letter sent privately to the diocese, now archived but long uncirculated, he writes, "There is no evidence of demonic behavior. Yet I am unsettled. The girls seem to anticipate one another, not with affection but necessity. One begins what the other must finish. It is not performance. It is something colder." This same period marks the first documented physical mirroring between the 2. On January the 12th, 1842, Cora arrived at school with a bandaged wrist, her movements stiff. That same morning, Clara, uninjured and without complaint, moved with a matching rigidity. When asked to explain it, she said only, "We practiced this at home." 2 weeks later, the reverse occurred. Clara developed a fever and missed 2 days. Cora, though healthy by all accounts, stayed seated throughout each class, refusing to move even for recess. Her hands remained in her lap, her eyes lowered. When addressed, she answered only in present tense, as if the questions were still being asked aloud to someone else. These anomalies never resulted in disciplinary action. Miss Hale attributed their coordination to twinned instruction. She wrote a single letter to the parish board that winter, stating that the girls were more alike in spirit than most care to admit, and that separating them during lessons caused emotional agitation. In the classroom's back cabinet, still intact during the 1869 county restoration, inspectors found 2 identical slates. Each bore faint traces of a lesson scratched too hard into the surface. Name your shape. Name your sound. No such exercise appears in any official curriculum. The handwriting matched neither girl. Taped to the underside of one slate was a scrap of cloth torn from a dress hem, in faded pencil barely legible. She said it before I could. The Willow Creek Parish School reopened in the spring of 1843 under the supervision of Mr. Nathaniel Voss, a retired circuit educator brought in from Portland. He inherited the building after nearly a year of closure, following the quiet and unofficial suspension of Miss Martha Hale. No charges were brought. No notice was posted. The new schoolmaster was advised not to disturb the upper storage cabinet and to use the existing seating chart as preserved. It was during this resumption of classes that Voss made note of an anomaly. While sweeping beneath the front row desks, a routine he described as wholly mundane, he paused beneath the station once shared by Clara and Cora Hale. There, gouged into the underside of the shared wooden bench, was a deep, erratic cut, approximately 17 inches in length. It began beneath the left leg rest and extended in a slow curve beneath the right, forming a crescent that stopped just shy of touching itself. The Grain of the wood had splintered in places, and the mark was uneven, cut not with the fluid motion of a carving blade, but with repeated scraping. Voss believed it to be graffiti, perhaps a child's idle work with a nail or quill, but when he attempted to highlight it using white chalk, the line completed itself, unbroken, precise, and cleanly arched. It connected both seating areas in a single deliberate gesture. What made the carving more unsettling was its position. The desks were mounted to the floor. For a child to produce the scratch, they would have had to lie on their back beneath the bench, working from a difficult and uncomfortable angle. No student reported seeing the damage made. No prior instructor had recorded its presence. He searched the building for tools or implements capable of such a gouge. None were found. The school had no jackknives, no woodworking tools accessible to students, and no signs of tampering with floorboards or baseboards near the desks. The mark was old, its edges darkened with time. It had not been made recently, and yet it had never been documented. Voss filed a quiet memo to the county clerk's office. It was never officially recorded. In his private ledger, discovered years later among estate documents, he wrote a short entry that remains the only first-hand observation of the carving's possible symbolism. Arc like a tether to join what is not two, seems not a design but a path. Within a week of discovering the mark, he repositioned the desks to separate them. Students were reassigned, and the original seats were never occupied again during his tenure. He later removed them entirely and stored them in the chapel outbuilding across the lane. The desks remain preserved in the Cumberland County Historical Depot, catalogued as anonymous artifacts from the early 1800s. Yet on the underside of one leg rest, barely visible under varnish, is a second line, much fainter, almost erased, scratched lightly beneath the arc. Begin where she left off. In her handwritten testimony to the Parish Relief Board dated December 20th, 1842, Martha Hale recounted the routine she had maintained with the Hale twins for nearly a decade. Each morning, midday, and evening, she prepared 2 identical plates of food, usually porridge, salted biscuits, or boiled potatoes, delivered by hand to the small upper bedroom the girls shared. The meals were always left on the small folding table between their beds. She did not remain while they ate. The following morning, she would retrieve the trays, and without fail, she claimed, both would be cleared. That changed on the morning of December the 4th, the day Cora Hale was discovered missing. In Martha's words, the breakfast consisted of rye toast, milk, and apple preserve. When she carried the trays downstairs that morning, one had been scraped clean. The other had not been touched. The spoon remained tucked beneath the napkin untouched. The rim of the plate was clean, but the food had not been eaten. More unusual was the position of the tray itself, flipped upside down, resting near the foot of the second bed. The toast had been flattened beneath it. The preserve, still intact, had soaked into the floorboards, leaving a dark oval stain that would never fully lift. Martha noted this in her log, but did not immediately report Cora missing. She claimed Clara had told her the girl was sleeping late. The room, dimly lit by frost-covered windows, gave no indication of disturbance. The blankets on Cora's side of the bed were pulled tightly, her pillow slightly indented. Martha believed she had merely risen and gone to the privy without mention. When parish investigators reviewed the tray in question 2 days later, they noted a pattern of fine scratches etched into the wood on its underside. 5 parallel lines, irregularly spaced, as if made by a dull fork or small nails. These marks were fresh, but the fork retrieved from the room had no signs of wear. No utensils were missing. Of further interest was the second spoon placed on the uneaten tray. Its bowl was inverted, pressed downward into the napkin almost deliberately. When the cloth was unfolded, faint charcoal residue was discovered beneath the linen, forming partial letters, BNTH. The letters were not completed. No other writing appeared. In a subsequent inventory of the kitchen, Martha provided 2 spoons she believed had been taken upstairs that day, but only one matched the wear pattern found on the scratched tray. The second was older, with a bent neck and a faint impression of initials on its handle, CH. She said Cora's mark. Records confirm only 2 identical sets of flatware were ever issued by the parish. The third bent, mismatched initial did not belong to the house. When asked about the spoon's origin, Martha hesitated, then offered a vague explanation. It may have come down in her pocket one day. The girls had odd habits. The tray was later placed into storage along with other household artifacts. When reviewed by the county historian in 1898, its catalog tag contained one line that hadn't appeared in the original record. Second plate refused. The letter arrived during a heavy thaw, one of those brief midwinter reprieves when snowmelt turns the roads to slush and the mail arrives a day early, or not at all. According to Postmaster Jonah Cutler, the envelope bore no return address, but had been routed through the Brunswick sorting depot. Its destination was plainly written in black ink, for C+C Hale. The handwriting was narrow, slanted, and inconsistent in pressure, suggesting a left-handed writer, possibly gloved. Cutler claimed the envelope was already damp upon arrival. It had not been exposed to rain, but rather bore signs of having been submerged, even briefly. The ink had not run, but the envelope was warped, and the paper inside had buckled in the center. When Martha Hale was handed the letter, she reportedly paused before opening it. In a later affidavit submitted to the parish board, she described a feeling of premature recognition, as if she already knew what the contents would be. Despite the stains, the letter had not been tampered with. She opened it in front of Cutler, who stood at the counter. Inside was a single folded sheet. No salutation, no date, no signature. One line only centered, "She walks beneath now." The phrase was not attributed. There were no markings on the back. But what drew the most attention was the postage stamp itself. A common brown 5-cent Maine issue, but bent inward at the corner, folded under with deliberate care. When lifted, a faint circle of discoloration could be seen beneath it, possibly the remnants of sealing wax, though no wax had been used to close the envelope. The crease itself was not accidental. Someone had folded the stamp in before mailing it. The practice of bending stamps had been discouraged by postmasters since the 1820s. In rare cases, folded corners were used to encode informal meanings, commonly among lovers or military families. An inward fold from the right corner had been used to signal distress or grief. But this stamp was bent inward, not downward, folded toward the center, obscuring, not broadcasting. Martha filed the letter inside her personal ledger between 2 dried pages of newsprint, but it did not stay there long. 3 weeks later, during a household inspection conducted after renewed concern from the church board, the envelope had vanished. Martha claimed she had misplaced it, but Clara later produced the folded letter from her arithmetic primer, where she had carefully creased it along each edge, matching the bent stamp's angle in all 4 corners. When asked if she had read the message, she nodded once and replied, "It isn't a message." No one could clarify what she meant. She refused to elaborate. The paper itself was later tested, though testing in the 1840s meant only inspection by lamplight and magnifying glass. A faint indentation was found beneath the printed line, barely perceptible unless viewed from the side. A pressure mark, possibly a second message removed or erased. The indentation, when traced in charcoal, revealed what may have been the beginning of a second word, beneath. No one knows what followed. The rest of the sheet had been pressed so flat it yielded no more. The letter was returned to the primer, but the stamp never lay flat again. On December 9, 1842, just 5 days after the report of Cora Hale's unexplained absence, a folded envelope arrived at the Cumberland County Board of Instruction, hand-delivered by a stable courier. Inside was a single page of stationery bearing no letterhead, no date at the top, and most unusually, no signature at the bottom. The note was brief, mechanically phrased. "I respectfully step down from my position as educator and caretaker, effective immediately. I will not contest the vacancy or seek remuneration. The ledger remains complete. Let no further entries be added under my name." The document was enclosed with a thin black ribbon pressed flat between the paper's crease. Its presence was noted by the clerk, but no annotation was made. In 1840s correspondence, black ribbons were sometimes used to signal mourning. Yet no death had been formally declared. No funeral had occurred. No grave had been dug. The letter was placed in the board's archives and quietly accepted. Miss Martha Hale, who had served the township for nearly 12 years, was removed from the registry of active instructors without further inquiry. The vacancy was listed in the Willow Creek Parish Education Register the following week. No public notice was issued. When Board Secretary Daniel Carver requested follow-up on the unspecific resignation, the request was denied by the board's chair, Henry Langston, who cited provisional sensitivity surrounding the matter. Langston's own logbook includes a marginal note beneath the entry for December 12th. "Keep the box sealed. Delay summary until spring." No one ever clarified what the box referred to. Attempts to contact Martha in the weeks following her departure yielded no reply. According to town census logs, she remained at the residence for another 4 months but ceased all instructional duties. Her school ledger, which she had referenced in her resignation, was found later among parish artifacts. It ends abruptly without a final line. The last attendance mark for the Hale twins is circled twice. The black ribbon enclosed in the letter was never catalogued as evidence. It was folded into the page and filed away. In 1899, during a routine digitization of archival materials, a county historian noted that the ribbon's reverse side had been scored with a pin, tiny puncture marks arranged in a line too uniform to be accidental. Under magnification, the pattern revealed an attempt at lettering. Though incomplete, the arrangement suggested 5 characters, BNTHE, with the final 2 letters faded or never formed. The page had absorbed slight discoloration where the pin had pressed too hard. Martha's name remained in the town's deed registry until 1847, when ownership of the farmhouse quietly passed to the township. The record of transfer contains no witness names. It is stamped with an uncharacteristic delay notation, filed 6 months after assumed vacancy. Her date of death is not listed in any county archive. Her name never reappeared in school rosters, church pew books, or community notices. She is not buried in Willow Creek. The last official record filed with her resignation lists her title not as teacher, widow, or guardian. It simply says Hale Martha relieved. By mid-January, with the household now reduced to a single child and no longer under formal oversight, the parish board dispatched 2 carpenters, not physicians or magistrates, to assess the structural condition of the Hale residence. Officially, their purpose was routine, to examine the foundation ahead of a spring thaw. Privately, they were instructed to evaluate whether the room in which the Hale twins had been kept could be restored for future use. The room had remained untouched since Clara's relocation to the guest chamber weeks prior. Widow Martha Hale had made no effort to clean or rearrange. Dust had gathered in the window corners, but the bedding was still neatly folded. Both pillows remained on the bed, one flat, one visibly indented. The 2 carpenters, Isaiah Wells and Samuel Holt, began disassembly by removing the frame bolts from the bedstead. What they found next was not included in their official filing, but it was preserved in a private letter sent by Holt to his brother, a letter now held in the Cumberland Historical Archives. The side rail on the girl's half was bent, not from the top, but from beneath. The metal curled downward as if pulled, not broken, bowed. The pressure did not come from weight. It came from direction. The bed frame had been iron, not wood, and was standard issue under parish housing provisions, known for rigidity. The bowing was not consistent with rust fatigue or manufacturing flaw. Instead, it exhibited torque distortion, as if something had pulled downward from the center of the frame, not applied weight atop it. Beneath the frame, the floorboards showed fine scratches visible even through the thick winter grime. They were arranged not in chaotic scatter, but in precise parallel arcs, each no more than 6 inches wide. The curves did not cross. They ran side by side in slow repetition, a pattern that did not appear random but rehearsed. Holt traced a few with carpenter's chalk. When connected, they resembled the loops seen in the girl's dream records, gentle hooks, incomplete circles that always curved to the right. In the corner behind the iron bedpost, Wells found a clump of linen threads, snagged against the splintered edge of the floor. They were blue, coarser than bedsheet fiber, and measured at least 8 inches long when unfurled. They had not torn from the pillow. They matched nothing else in the room. Martha offered no explanation. When asked about the sag in the bed, she suggested perhaps the child sat too often in one place. But Clara, when questioned later, said she had not sat on the bed at all. Not since her sister disappeared. She slept there, she said, referring to Cora, and I lay down beside the weight. No follow-up question was recorded. That winter, the parish board ordered the bed frame removed from the home. It was placed in storage beneath the old schoolhouse along with several of the twins' belongings. By the time county records were digitized in the 1990s, the item had been delisted from the inventory. All that remains is a handwritten tag, barely legible on the back of an archived floor plan. 5 words scrawled in faded ink. One side never rose again. The welfare examination of Clara Hale was conducted on the 2nd floor of the parish hall, inside a borrowed vestry room where Sunday garments still hung behind frosted glass. There is no surviving transcript. What remains is a summary entry in the county relief logbook initialed by Abigail Morse, a midwife and clerk assigned to assist with child interviews in the wake of institutional dissolution. The entry reads, "Interview difficult to progress. Child withdrawn. Answered to both names. Referred to sister in present tense. No visible distress. Suggested shared dreaming continues. Requests psychological referral. Denied. According to Morse's later correspondence, Clara had been asked a series of rote questions: date of birth, place of residence, names of guardians. When asked for the name of her twin, she answered softly, Clara. A pause followed. Then she repeated, Cora. No correction, no clarification. When asked which was correct, she stared ahead without blinking and did not respond. Morse's report included no speculation. But the interview was halted shortly after the child was offered a glass of water and led to a side table with a small mirror fixed to the wall above it. Standing before her reflection, Clara did not adjust her hair or avoid the glass as many children might. She simply stared, not in confusion but in study. Then, in a voice Morse described as level but fatigued, Clara whispered, She wakes up earlier than me. The phrase matched precisely the final line from the last joint dream entry recorded in 1841, prior to Miss Hale discontinuing the practice. That same phrase, repeated in identical wording, had appeared 3 times in the school's devotional composition records. No adult had ever taught or encouraged it. The phrasing was their own. Following the interview, Clara was returned to the guest room at the Hale residence, but the incident introduced a persistent procedural question. Which name, if either, did she now identify as her own? Clerks began rotating entries. Some forms labeled her as Clara, others as Cora. One draft of the county census listed the child simply as C. Hale, aged 10, with no twin recorded. A later update included a marginal note in faded charcoal. Appears to answer when called by either. At the parish board's request, the mirror used during the interview was removed from the room. It was placed in storage but later broken during a spring cleaning effort. When examined before disposal, a partial handprint was discovered on the inner surface of the glass, not on the front, but beneath the silver backing. It was not complete, 4 fingers only, no palm. The glass had not been opened. No effort was made to preserve it. When Clara was questioned again days later, she gave only this statement, I know when I'm not awake, but she doesn't. Her reflection, captured in a rare daguerreotype taken weeks afterward, shows her seated alone, unsmiling, but something remains unclear. At the bottom edge of the silver plate, a faint pencil mark appears beneath her chair. It reads, both present. When Town Clerk Jonah Cutler began consolidating education logs for the 1842 Parish Review, he expected discrepancies, missed names, fluctuating enrollment, a few illegible signatures. What he did not expect were the pencil marks, faint, deliberate, and easy to overlook. They appeared not in the body of the records, but along the outermost margins of the school's attendance ledger. These marks, thin charcoal ticks no longer than a fingernail, were spaced evenly and arranged in pairs running vertically beside the weekly entries for the Hale twins. From September 1841 through December 1842, they occurred with mechanical precision, always even in number, always grouped 2 by 2. Most entries carried 4, 6, or 8 paired lines beside the girls' names. No annotation, no explanation. Only 1 week, the final week of Cora's recorded attendance, broke the pattern. On the entry for December the 4th, the margin held a single unpaired line, still vertical, still aligned, but isolated. No one had noticed it during the initial filing. It bore no initials, no corrections. Cutler initially suspected idle scribbling, a student's restlessness, or a teacher's habit. But upon comparing the marks against other entries, the pattern became more unsettling. No other student's name bore any similar notations. No lines accompanied records for absences, illnesses, or holidays. Only the Hales, and only during instructional weeks. Intrigued, Cutler ran his pencil lightly along the edge of the page. Several of the charcoal marks were impressed into the paper, not merely written. Someone had used pressure, possibly while the book was closed, to press through the cover. The depth of the indentations varied, but the December 4th mark appeared deeper than the rest, as if the hand that made it had lingered. Cutler brought the book to the town select board. It was passed between committee members, but dismissed as non-essential detail. No mention of the markings was added to the census records or the revised school ledger summary. In a letter to the county registrar, Cutler recorded a different observation. On the reverse side of the ledger's final attendance page, he noticed a small smudge, circular in shape, roughly the size of a thumbnail. When held to the light, the spot revealed the outline of a rubber nub, likely from a slate pencil eraser. Centered within the smudge was a faint loop, like the base of a cursive C half erased. Pressed below that, A second mark, horizontal, shallow, crossing the base of the loop. Not a name, not a letter, just a symbol, one that had been started and stopped. He did not record it in the formal books. The following spring, Cutler resigned from his position. In his private notes, now housed at the Maine State Historical Archive, he wrote one final line beneath a tracing of the ledger margin. Even numbers, always, until she wasn't. The page was never rewritten. The margin marks were never explained. But later clerks, when digitizing the entries, noted a final change at the bottom corner of the December 4th page. A second tick had been added, but no one had logged it, and the charcoal was fresh. The final note was discovered by Deacon Ezra Tate, who had been assigned to inventory the unused rooms of the Hale residence for reassignment. By the time of his inspection, the schoolroom had not been entered in several weeks. The windows were boarded for winter. The fire grate was cold. The desk at the far end, Miss Martha Hale's, remained locked, its drawer bearing the dust outline of a missing key. The lock was pried open with a hearth tool. Inside were routine items: 3 chalk stubs, a teacher's bell with a broken clapper, and a spool of blue twine. Folded between 2 pages of an arithmetic manual was a sheet of gray-tinged stationery, thin and slightly warped. Centered in the middle, written in a fine but unsteady hand, was the sentence, "She is not gone. She is beneath." It was signed by no one. At first, the note appeared ordinary, its content troubling but physically unremarkable. Yet, as Tate lifted the page, he noticed the ink had not set. It left residue on his glove, smudging across the center line. Surprised, he let it fall back into the drawer. He returned 2 days later with a county clerk to record the note's contents, but the ink still had not dried. Even after resting in the closed drawer, away from light or moisture, the writing remained wet to the touch. A blotting paper pressed gently against the words lifted the ink as if freshly applied. The message was intact, yet unfixed. Clerk Hannah Wells documented the event in a field ledger, now kept at the Cumberland County Archive. Her entry reads, "Water-based ink, unusual behavior. Paper not damp. Words lift freely from surface. Composition suggests refusal, not error. A message reluctant to settle. Attempts to reproduce the conditions. Failed. Parish records show no similar incidents with ink or paper degradation. All other documents in the drawer were stable. The manual that enclosed the note was completely dry. The note was removed and brought to the vestry office for sealing. When examined under lamplight, it revealed 2 indentations in the lower right corner. Parallel lines no more than a half-inch long, as if from the pressure of a child's thumbnail held too tightly. Between the lines, a smudge of charcoal dust, not visible until brushed with wool. The sentence itself, "She is not gone, she is beneath," bears resemblance to a phrase Clara had been recorded repeating in early December, shortly after Cora's disappearance. The welfare officer noted that when asked where her sister had gone, Clara had pointed downward and mouthed the word beneath. She never elaborated. The origin of the ink remains unverified. The drawer contained no pen, no inkwell, no scrapings. The ribbon used to tie the drawer shut bore no stains. The note was sealed in a linen envelope and added to the board's secure archive. When reviewed again in 1848, the ink had still not dried. A notation added in the margin of the archive report states only, "Recommend preservation." Paper resists finality. The final observation came from a junior clerk whose name is now redacted, scribbled faintly on the envelope flap in pencil. "The message hasn't stopped." The photograph was not catalogued, donated, or displayed. It was discovered by chance, wedged deep inside the binding of a weather-worn hymnal titled Voices Lifted in Dawn's Light, stored on the bottom shelf of the town chapel's vestry. It was Jonah Platt, a maintenance clerk for the parish, who found the hymnal while clearing the damp crawl space beneath the altar floorboards. The book had swollen with moisture, the spine cracked from disuse, slipped between pages 48 and 49. "Two shall rise before dawn." It was a cabinet card portrait measuring 4 by 6 inches, sepia-toned, heavily foxed, the paper curled at the corners. On the reverse, a faint charcoal inscription, C+C, followed by a single dash. The image itself was technically standard for its time, posed formal, tightly framed against a studio curtain backdrop, but it took only moments for Platt to notice what parish records would later refer to with clinical restraint as a misalignment. The girls, clearly Clara and Cora Hale, were not facing the camera directly. Their torsos were forward, but their heads were subtly turned, angled to the right, away from the lens. Their gaze is not cast into the distance, but fixed together on something just outside the left-hand edge of the frame. Their faces, though visible, were partially obscured by the turn. Neither smiled, neither blinked. The right eye of each girl was slightly out of focus, creating the impression that the camera had caught them mid-movement, though the exposure would have been several seconds long. This meant one of two things. The movement was deliberate and slow, or something disrupted their stillness while the shutter remained open. Town photographer Caleb Morse, who ran a small daguerreotype shop out of his barn during that time, had no memory of taking the photograph. His ledgers, still intact, show multiple portraits of children from the schoolhouse, including a group image of the Hale twins with 5 classmates taken in late August. That group photo remains clear, centered, focused. The twins appear normal, but the cabinet card in the hymnal was not in the registry. No fee was recorded. No delivery noted. It bore no photographer's mark, unusual for Morse, who prided himself on labeling all his prints with a handwritten embossing stamp. A forensic archivist who examined the image in the 1980s made a curious observation. When scanned and digitally aligned, the eyes of both girls, though directed right, appeared to converge at the exact same vertical point, as if tracing a line toward a missing third figure. Cropping and aspect ratio suggest that a larger image may have been trimmed down. No full-size version has ever surfaced. Parish Council notes from that same April include a brief motion to remove all unshelved hymnals from circulation. The photo was stored with other church ephemera in the municipal archive, but remains uncatalogued. A final note handwritten in red ink on the back of the cabinet card was discovered years later under layers of mildew. They turned before we asked. By spring, the town had resolved quietly to shutter the Hale schoolhouse. Though no official statement linked the closure to the events of the previous winter, internal correspondence between members of the Cumberland County Board of Instruction points to a growing unease among those tasked with maintaining the building. It began with reports from a hired carpenter, Amos Reed, brought in to reinforce the front stoop and secure the warped shutters. His work order dated April 16, 1843, included a curious side note: subfloor moves after dusk. Sounds like settling, but no frame shift recorded. Taps audible. Always 2. Always again. Reed had returned on 3 separate evenings to complete the ceiling work, but claimed the floorboards along the front row of desks would not hold fast. After applying fresh nails and setting screws into the joists, he returned the next morning to find them backed out. Not missing, simply loosened, laid neatly on the floor beside the boards they had secured. Initially, the town clerk attributed the issue to wood contraction from spring thaw. But Reed insisted the movement was selective, always limited to the same 6-foot section near the far wall, the one where Clara and Cora Hale had sat for years. The schoolhouse blueprints preserved from the 1820s showed no crawl space beneath that section. The foundation was stone. When the subfloor was temporarily removed for inspection, no cavity or water damage was found. Yet 2 of the floorboards bore faint indentations repeating every 8 inches, small oval impressions no more than a 1/4 inch wide, arranged in pairs. The decision was made to reseal the boards with tar and pitch, a method typically reserved for sealing barn lofts. But by May the 4th, workers returned to find the sealant had cracked cleanly, as if lifted from below in one smooth motion. The boards remained aligned, the cracks followed the grain, but the pitch had split symmetrically along the exact outline of the removed section. Parish minutes from that week include a brief motion hastily added: recommend closure of instructional structure due to ongoing disrepair, risk of undermining. Recommend transfer of materials. No official cause was recorded. The reason cited was structural instability. Yet the logs tell a different story. A visiting instructor from Brunswick, Mrs. Eliza Thornton, who had been brought in to evaluate the space for future use, declined to enter the building after staying late on May the 6th. Her statement, later included in a sealed memorandum, reads, "The taps began beneath my feet in pairs 7 times, then 1, then nothing." She described the sensation not as vibration but as dull, measured knocking, always in pairs, always at floor level, slowing after midnight. The desks were removed the following week. The floorboards, still intact, were stacked against the back wall and marked for firewood. But when the schoolhouse was condemned and boarded up, the wood remained untouched. In a 1938 inspection of the sealed structure prior to its final demolition, one archivist recorded a single detail spray-painted on the interior. Wall by earlier surveyors. It was not a tag or a measurement, just one phrase written in black: "Do not nail." Every township maintained an education census, a required log of school-aged children, typically updated in late spring. It noted age, guardianship, attendance status, and location within the parish district. In 1843, the Willow Creek Ledger was overseen by Deputy Registrar Silas Morse, a methodical man known for precise penmanship and an aversion to incomplete fields. That year, the ledger ended sooner than expected. Under the heading for H, the names continue without interruption. Kinney, Ruth, Carter, Elias, then the I's, the J's, everything in place until the final letter C. There, on a line by itself, unaccompanied by a last name, residence, or parental designation, was a single first name, Clara. It stood alone. The box for surname was left blank. The residence column bore no township or cross street. The instructional status field, which typically held check marks or withdrawal codes, was empty. Instead, to the right of her name, where the registrar might annotate age or schooling method, a single pencil arrow pointed downward, slanted, barely visible, no explanation. The following page, where entries should have continued, was left entirely blank. Not even a heading, except in the lower right corner, written in faint cursive, was one word beneath. It was not a field, not a note, not an annotation, just a word sitting outside the column grid as if added in hesitation or afterthought. No one signed the page, no initials, no record number. The anomaly was first noticed not by Morse himself, but by a traveling census auditor named Gideon Holt, who had been dispatched from Brunswick to review the accuracy of rural ledgers ahead of a proposed education reform. His journal, now archived, records the moment plainly. The line ends too early. No surname, no next child, then silence. And that word. No context, no format, not error, not mistake, something else. Holt asked Morse for clarification. Morse responded that the name had appeared in a memo from the parish board. The instruction, he said, was to record the child as present but unassigned. No further direction had been given. He could not explain the arrow. He claimed not to recall writing it. An internal note filed later that month by Parish Secretary Lydia Ainsworth suggests a quiet awareness among officials that the matter should not be pressed. The note includes a line now underlined in red ink in the county's scanned archive: no correction required if no correction requested. There was no record of Clara Hale attending any formal instruction after January. She was not enrolled in any other township. No teacher listed her as under care. And yet her name remained in the 1843 census, untethered, unexplained, and alone. Later additions to the ledger resumed several pages on, beginning with Norris, Abigail. No reference was made to the skipped entries. The blank page remained. In 1914, during a historical census restoration, a clerk found the ledger partially stuck together by damp. When they separated the C page from the blank one, the word beneath had left a light transfer mark, not just on the corner but across the entire page, invisible until held against light. It formed no word, only a shape, a loop, then another, then nothing. Some stories don't vanish. They're filed under the wrong name and left to rot in the margins.